I'm Marc Prensky. I'm the author of a dozen books, and I've spoken and given keynotes in over 50 countries. I coined the term digital natives and digital immigrants 25 years ago, and those terms are now in the Oxford English Dictionary. And my passion is helping people, and especially young people, understand how the future is changing and adapt to it as people always need to do. And so I'm passionate about working with people in a futuristic and positive sense. Today, I was lucky enough to be on Conversation with Kim Sorrelle. She's a wonderful interviewer and a very interesting person, and it brought out a lot of the ideas in me in very good ways. So thank you, Kim.
Welcome to the show. I am so glad you're here. I am Kim Sorrelle. I'm an author. I'm a business coach. I'm an expert on love. I do a lot of things. I speak and I get to do so many fun things in life. But one of my favorite things to do is meet incredible people. And today I have a guest who it's going to be really interesting because he's going to make you think a bit. And he's going to talk about kids, and he's going to make you think about how you view kids and how you view them coming into the world and their capabilities and everything else. And so anyway, you're going to want to stick around for the whole show. It's just really great what he's doing, that he's challenging the sort of the normal thinking. And I think by the end of this, you're really going to be so happy to know what Marc has to deliver. Marc Prensky, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you're here, Marc. And we talked about this a little off air, that some of what you have to say may be controversial. I just think it's challenging thinking. And so it's going to be very interesting when we get into it. But first, I'd like people to get to know you a little bit. Like, what, where is it in your life that you went, man, I think I'll write a book someday?
I never thought I would be an author. I don't have a PhD. I have lots of master's degrees because I never thought that I could write 100 pages. And now I've written thousands. So that piece came to me later. But what I grew up with was a kid who didn't fit in really well, who was a kid who was misunderstood. And that has stayed with me all my life. And really, my mission now is to help young people be understood and be and to thrive in a very changing world. And that's what I think is the other thing about my life. I lived through a very interesting period of time, as you did, as probably many of the people listening did, when so much changed. But now after the year 2000, roughly, we're entering into such a different time period, such a different age. The technologies that we have are growing exponentially. And so we're evolving. We're going through a period of evolution and becoming different humans. And that is something that is challenging and that we have to figure out how to deal with, especially with our young people.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting, Marc. I'm going to take you back a little bit on what you had to say, but that's so true. So when you were growing up, though, you were misunderstood, didn't feel a part, and that is a tough place to be as a kid. It's a tough place to be as an adult because it can carry on in life, right? But what a hard place to be as a kid. And so, how did you get through that time?
Well, I think the greatest gift that any person can get, especially a young person, is somebody who sees you as you see yourself and then guides you and leads you to that. And for me, that was an uncle. I was very fortunate to have that. So he took me places and did things for me that even my family wouldn't do because they didn't really understand who I was. The second piece, so that was, I want everybody to have that in the world. I want everybody to have somebody who understands you as you see yourself. And I work for that. The second piece was that I just was not a rule follower. And there are lots of good reasons for rules, and there are lots of times when they're needed, but I am not somebody who is comfortable following somebody else's rules. I typically know what I want to do, what I think is best for me at any moment, and that's what I want to do. And that's what I've done my whole life. And sometimes it's gotten me into trouble, but most of the time it's led me to original thinking. And I got to work
Interesting.
for a number of companies like the Boston Consulting Group, where I was able to use that original thinking and hone it. And now I bring it to the field of education and young people and to say, let's look at this whole world in very different ways.
Wow, I love that. I love the whole idea of original thinking. And too often, I think we're born with imagination, right? And we're born thinking outside the box, but then we're told not to. We're told by teachers, by parents, by whoever, oh, you can't do that. You're not good enough. That's not possible. And I think sometimes that imagination can go away, and all of a sudden we're not thinking differently, we're thinking like everybody else. And it's nice to be able to put that aside and be able to use your imagination, live in your imagination, and create and think about things in life, not just going with the norm, but how should we be looking at things?
100%. The there are five things that I think that young people need that are missing today. They're not in school, they're really not in how they're brought up. First one is high enthusiasm. So every person has something in them of which they say, hell yes, I'll do that. I'm enthusiastic. And we don't do a good job of finding that out, bringing it out, and then letting them go in those directions. The second piece is that we overstress people because stress is not good for people. And certainly excessive stress. It causes inflammation. It causes all kinds of things. It can cause depression. And so we're now in a time when young people are very heavily overstressed in many places. And so the third part is imagination, is exactly what you were talking about. Everybody has imagination. We have lived up till now, all humans, in two worlds, the real world and the imagination world. And now we have a third world, the virtual world. But the imagination has been trapped. It's not only been tamped down, but it's also been trapped. Most people couldn't get out their imaginations. If they did, we called them artists. We called them creative people. And it was trapped because we didn't have the technique. We couldn't paint or we couldn't produce what was in our minds. And guess what? We've invented a way to do that. And it's called AI. I call it missing intelligence, but it is a way that you can take what's in your mind, and if you can talk about it, and if you can produce it, then it can produce it in the real world. It can write a book for you that's in your imagination. It can build a house for you that's in your imagination. It can do all these things, and it's just starting, so it will get much better. Uh, the fourth thing is self-knowledge because we don't do a good job of that either. Most people, most of the kids, when I come and I say, well, what's your greatest strength? What's your greatest passion? What are you interested? They'll say, I don't know. And they should know because we should have done a better job of helping them know. And there are a lot of questions that you can ask to help them. What do you watch on YouTube? What would your friends call on you to do? The questions like that. And then the last thing, which is really missing, and it's such a shame, is real world accomplishment and kids having impact, even at early ages. And I've been working with groups that do this around the world, and it's amazing that even as early as age 3, kids can have real impact on the world. There's a wonderful story in Spain about 3-year-olds who were told to throw away their garbage and their trash, but they couldn't reach the bins on the poles outside. So they worked through this process and designed new bins, and they went and met with the mayor, and they figured out what needed to be done. The mayor agreed, and this beautiful video ends with them all 3-year-olds celebrating around these new bins that they got into place. And
Wow.
just imagine If you can do that when you're three, if you learn that when you're three and you see a problem, you can go out and fix it. It may not be immediate, but it may not be easy, but you can do it and then point to the solution. And then you keep doing that. You're going to be a very different person when you grow up.
Oh my gosh, so true, so true. So, Mark, you just went through all five of them, and so we're going to break each one of those down.
Let's.
And I love it that we're talking about this because too often I hear people say, "Oh, that next generation, I don't know what we're going to do with a workforce. They're not workers, or that those kids, they don't know anything about life, and we're dropping the ball, whatever." And we're dooming generations, like we're assuming that kids aren't going to be able to do anything, which is so not true. I mean, I'm sure they said it about my generation. They said it about our generation, right? But an AI is something that people are afraid of and shouldn't be. And so I love it that we're talking about this. So let's start out with number one and let's dive into that.
So the first one is the hell yes. It's the enthusiasm. And that's something that I don't know why we don't do that. But we put kids in school and we tell them this is what you have to do and this is the curriculum and here's what you have. And we don't really care. Some of them will maybe get enthusiastic about a little bit of it, but that's a very small minority. What we don't do that we could do is bring out, talk to them, find out what are you, Kim? What are you, Mark? Imagine what are you enthusiastic about? If I asked you to do this, what would you say hell yes to? And once we know that, you are motivated internally. And then you will do all sorts of things. You will learn things. You will acquire skills that you to accomplish and to be motivated because you love getting out of bed and going to school every day. And
Yeah.
you can
So
do
give
a
us
much better job.
right, right, right. So it's so true. You want to have that motivation. You want your kids to have that motivation, your grandkids, whoever, to get up and get out of bed and be so excited to go to school. So, what are some examples of that?
Well, for example, my son told me that he's now 19, but when he was 10 or 11, he suddenly got interested in flying. And flying is interesting, and but it's also expensive and it's dangerous and it's all these other things. But I said, no, let's go take a flying lesson. And so we took a flying lesson. He got really excited about it. He's now about to get his private pilot's license. And that was something that he was always excited about. Other things, if I talk to him about school, he'll tell me, oh, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. They do this. If I talk to him about projects, he'll say every once in a lifetime a project comes around I'm interested in. But if I talk to him about his current interest, which happens to be poker and making money through sports gambling, which I'm not thrilled about, but it works for him, he will talk for hours. He will tell me
Mhm.
everything. He knows he's been learning statistics. He's been learning all these things on his own because it's his hell yes. That's what he's enthusiastic about. And
Mhm.
everybody has that. Everybody has that.
Does
And that
everybody know they have it?
not necessarily, but so you really have to go through and probe in order to find out. And this is what I do in life. I talk to young people a lot all over the world. And I try to probe and say, let's bring out what you're enthusiastic about. Let's find this subject that makes you go on and on and on and on and on and tell me about it and ask the questions and figure this out. And it's not always easy because we school never encouraged that. And many parents don't. Some do. They'll bring their kids to Olympic level, and that's great. But a lot of them say, no, go do this because it makes money, or go do this because I did it, or go do this because that's the way I think about the world. And when we do that to kids, it does not make them happy. It makes them depressed.
Right, right, right. So every kid needs that. Every kid needs, we all do. Adults need it too, right? And as you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, there are things that I'm so passionate about that I could talk for hours. I could write for hours. I can, no, not that anyone wants to hear me talk for hours, but there are things that Definitely. I'm so passionate about, and I'm thinking about my grandkids, and they do each have something that they're passionate about, and that's also just a great way to start a conversation, because kids can
Absolutely.
be quiet after a whole day at school, and their minds are weary or whatever has happened in the day, but to start a conversation over something that they're hell yesing, that's a pretty cool thing.
And it works, and it's amazing how they will anybody, any person, excuse me. It's amazing how any person will talk about what they're passionate about, what they're enthusiastic about. And when you do that, you don't have to, that brings us to the second question of stress, because you don't have to stress them out. Young people, that one of the big myths that's going around today is that the malaise that we all see in kids and some of this depression and some of this anxiety is caused by technology. And it's not. It may be in terms of bullying. That's the one exception. And if you're bullied, it's not good and we should prevent that. But mostly the stress on kids, it comes from adults. It comes from parents. It comes from teachers who are so scared about the future changing. They're so scared that they say, well, at least do this, at least get a fallback, at least get a degree, at least get a this, at least get good grades. And so when I talk to kids, they don't ever say I'm stressed by my phone. They say I'm stressed by my parents, I'm stressed by my teachers, I'm stressed by school, I'm stressed by my homework. That's and so I think we could do a much better job of de-stressing young people, and all of us obviously want that. But the reaction that I've observed, and I don't think enough people admit it. It's easy to blame the phones. It's easy to blame somebody else and say something else. Oh no, it's not us. It's the phones that are stressing our kids out. But that's not the truth. The truth is that we are afraid, many of us in the older generation, because the world is changing so dramatically, and we know it's coming, and we don't know what to do because we haven't lived in that time. And we pass that on to our kids every day.
Mm, wow. So what is the answer to that? Like, what are some things that parents, teachers, whoever can do to take stress away from kids?
Yeah, well, I have three things that I say that you can do immediately to de-stress kids. The first one is actually listen to them. And you would be amazed. And most parents would say, "Oh yeah, I listen, I listen, I listen." And if you talk to the kids, on the other hand, their biggest complaint around the world is that our parents don't listen to us. They don't take us seriously. They don't let us do what we think we want to do. And so we need to spend more time doing that and not judging. I've heard parents say, "My kid will play a team sport." I don't care. They can choose which one, but they will play a team sport, or you will do this, or don't. And so that doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes you can help them, obviously. The second thing is let them do what they think is best for them. And so they may think that, well, you may think that it's school that they have to excel at. And they might say, I'm not really a school person. I don't get along here. And my kid used to call them the tryhards. And you say, I'm not a tryhard, right? I like this. I want to do this. I feel best. I thrive. I feel best about myself when I'm doing something else. And for some kids, it's sports. And for some kids, it's other things. So pay attention to that and give them permission to go in some of those directions, especially if they're not dangerous and they're not going to hurt them necessarily, but they are different than your ideas. And then the third thing that I like is never say no. Instead, say yes if. So, yes, you can do, and whatever you ask for, you can do it if. You can jump off a building if you have a parachute and lots of mattresses and all the safety things there, and you did that. You can do almost anything under the right conditions. And now, if you really want to do that, let's negotiate those conditions. Let's figure it out. And the funny thing is that I have thought about this for a long time. I met a young lady, curiously enough, from Switzerland who said, "Yeah, that's how my father raised me. He never said no. He always said yes if, if you do this." And it really does work. It really does work because it gives you the sense of empowerment. I can do it. Now,
Mm.
not necessarily without conditions, but I can do it. And it's the I can attitude that we
Yeah.
really want to foster in young people. I can,
Yeah.
and then
I
I
love that.
choose, and then I
Right.
accomplish, and then I see results. And there's a whole group called Design for Change that I work with that's in 70 countries in the world that promotes the I can attitude. That's all they do. And they take kids and classes all over the world and they do projects with them. And all they want to do is have these young people grow up with the idea, I can,
Mhm.
because we don't always tell them that and they conclude the opposite.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it empowers kids, right? When you say, yes, if
Yes,
it puts the ball in their court to make the
precisely.
right decisions, right? And make the right choices. And then because you can use it with anything. Like I have a friend who was told this concept and her little boy, she had a hard time, and 10-year-old boy had a hard time getting him to help around the house, do the things that he's supposed to do around the house. And so she felt like she was always on him. Oh my gosh, you got to do this. Here's your list. This is what you're supposed to do. Why aren't you doing it? Why am I having such a hard time? And she switched things around and she instead said, by Saturday afternoon, I need your room clean. And so, what time do you think you can get your room clean by Saturday afternoon? Right.
Yeah.
And then she started saying yes, if to everything. Like, I want
Hmm.
to go to my friend's house instead of, having to do the dishes. Oh, can I do that? Yes, if you get the dishes done first. Yes, if you do the dishes when you come home. Yes, if, whatever. It just makes so much sense. And saying no, I with my kids growing up, I always felt like was one of the toughest things to do was to
Yeah.
say no. Because it's not like you want to say yes in a spoiling way, but you want to say yes in a creative way. Yeah, yes, give them the opportunities and yes, give them their own empowerment to be able to make decisions. Teach them how to make decisions, right? And the
Exactly. And
younger
help
you
them
are when you learn
understand
that.
that there are conditions that work for almost everything. And you may or may not be able to fulfill them at the moment, but you can certainly talk about them and negotiate what they are. And the reason you're doing this is to get to something you want to do.
Mhm.
That's the reason. And if you want to do something and somebody says no, that's just going to frustrate you and it's just going to make you resent that answer and resent that person. If somebody says, "Yeah, that's fine, but this is what you have to do. If you do this, then you can do it." And I'm not against your doing what you want to do. I'm for you doing what you want to do if you meet whatever the appropriate conditions are and you have a say in making those conditions. And that's also what makes it empowering.
Yeah, yes. What a great way to parent, really, to be able to do that. And I would imagine with everything that you've seen, Mark, anybody could make that shift at any moment. So even if you were this no, 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 no parent yesterday, today you could become this yes if parent
I,
and see what changes in your kid.
Absolutely. What I've observed my whole career is thinking about things that we do, and a lot of them we do because of tradition. A lot of them we do because that was how we were brought up. And this is not just as parents, it's also as teachers in school. We think you should learn math, English, science, and social studies because we learned math, English, science, and social studies. We think you should do all these things, and when you start looking at it from scratch, and you're saying, who are these people? Young people are fully developed humans. They just don't have the same experience in the world that older people have. But they are, I call them people who happen to be young. And the approach for adults often is, no, this is my kid, I own them. I
Mm.
can tell them what to do. And, I am the boss of them. And the kids all say that. You're not the boss of me. right? And
Yeah.
so when you don't boss kids around and you let them choose and you give them not just five choices like math, English, science, social studies, or arts, then you give them infinite choices. And the wonderful thing about the time we're in now is that we can do that much more easily than we ever could before. Because in the past, we had to batch process these kids. We had not enough teachers, too many kids, and we had to put them in classrooms and have them all do the same thing because it was the only reasonable way to do it. Now we're in a world with AI and with technology and with everything where everybody can go in their own direction. And just like you did with all the kinds of things that you're doing with your podcast and your books and your this, and that's an opportunity that we really need to be giving our kids starting very early. They should be writing their books with AI when they're 2 or 3. I want a book. I just wrote about this. I want a book, a parent told me, about a duck alligator. What's a duck alligator? Okay, come sit on my lap. Let's go to ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, show me a duck alligator. Bang, there's a duck alligator. Write me a book about a duck alligator. It will do this. And that's the kind of thing that people, humans, can now do at the ages where this was impossible before we had this extended and missing intelligence.
So true. So true. And it's still using your imagination. It's not limiting you. It's you're still being you, but you're able to bring your imagination to life.
Precisely, and the words that are used. It's grease for the imagination. It's lubrication for getting it out into the world. And AI doesn't do anything by itself. It doesn't just sit there and do things. We have to tell it what to do, and then it helps us. And it's really a part of our intelligence. And the wonderful part about it is that it brings into our intelligence everything ever created by humans. So because it knows, it's trained on all that stuff. It knows what Socrates said. It knows what Shakespeare said. It knows what, Frank Lloyd Wright built. It knows all those things. So as we ask it to do things, it's informed by the whole history of the world. And that's something we never, ever had before. It used to be, well, all you had was in your head and what you read and what you got taught in school. Now you have everything. And it's a great starting point.
Wow. Wow. I love what you just said about how to take stress away. Those three things are so true. And just, man, if we could take stress away from kids and start empowering them, that's a big thing, right? So, what is the next one?
So the next one is self-knowledge. We talked about imagination. The next one is self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is something that we have not been very good at helping kids understand. What are you passionate about? A lot of times you'll say, kids, I don't know. Or they'll say something like, well, I just want to be like Steph Curry, or I just want to be like Beyonce, or I want to be like Taylor Swift. And and we never take the next step, which says, well, why do you want that? Do you want that because you want the fame and you just want to be known by everybody in the world? Or do you want it because they're rich? And if what you want to do is be rich, hey, that you don't have to become an artist. You can go to business school or you can do a lot of things. But you have to know what you want. You have to know what you bring to the party, where you add value in a conversation, in a project, and something like that. And you can get at that by saying, what would your friends call on you to do if they needed something? What do they think
Great
you're so
question.
good at that they would ask you? And we don't ask those kind of questions of kids. And when you ask them, they say, I'm not sure. Let me think about that, you know? And
Mm.
eventually they come up with this thing. So the more you know yourself, and we have lots of ways to do this. We have instruments and tests and things you can questionnaires, but we just don't use them in a big way. I hope we can get to do that in my lifetime and have an app that I call the birthday book, right? Every year on your birthday, you go through this set of questions, and you're asked, well, what are you most excited about, and what do you care about, and who are the people you care about, and you know that stuff at the tip of your fingers so that you can apply it.
Mm.
So self-knowledge is number four.
It is. It is. And it's important for adults too. Like I
Totally.
think that's another thing that we can lose along the way because we're told what we are. And
Mm,
so we forget who we are
yeah,
because of all these voices coming our way that this is what we're supposed to be. And if you take a step back and figure out, well, what do I want? What am I passionate about? How do I want to live my life? Who am I?
mhm.
Then it's such a great place to be when you understand who you are. And so, how much better or how great is that for kids? But
It's
we all need to
fantastic.
do that. We all need that. So that's
It's
so good.
fantastic for everybody. And I heard something not actually relatively recently that made me think about why how this connects to the next step, which is doing projects, which is actually accomplishing. And the person was saying, when you die or when your life ends and people are talking about you, they talk a little bit about, oh, this was a good person or that was that, but mostly they talk about the projects that you chose to do and the things that you accomplished. And so for that reason, just to be a successful person, to have a life that is worthwhile, you choose a set of projects. Some people choose to help their family. Some people choose to help their community. Some people choose to help, whatever it is. And so I think every young person needs to have a project going on at any one time that they have chosen, that they think is really an important thing, that has some meaningful impact on the world. And that can be very small. It can be something that makes your family better. It can be something that makes your parents happier. Whatever it is, or it could be something big that cleans up the environment or deals with one of the big UN goals. But if you're not looking to use the person you are to make a positive impact on the world, you're missing something as a human being. And and we can instill that really easily. That's again, I can. But once you say I can, you have to say I choose.
Mm.
And then you have to actually accomplish something. And the interesting criterion for that is before and after. So what does it mean to have impact? And a lot of people, they'll say, oh, we've reached 3 million kids or whatever it is. No, for me, impact is see that? Before, it didn't exist or it wasn't very good. And now, because of what I and my team did, it's so much better, as you can see.
Mm.
That's what I call measurable positive impact. It's before and after. And there's no other, you don't have to take a test. You don't have to do anything. People can notice. It's did you make an impact or didn't you? Did you make a difference? Is there a before or after or isn't there?
Oh, wow. Yeah. What a great way to look at it. It just breaks it down so simply. So it doesn't have to be this, yes, then I wrote this 40-page report and then I turned it in and then the mayor called me to his office and that's how I know I accomplished something, right? It doesn't have to be anything besides what was it like before and what is it like after. I love that.
And that's the real problem with what they call project-based learning and other things in school. They're part of learning, and the product is a report. And that's not bad. People think and they produce this report, but nothing happens. Nothing changes in the world. And so and when it changes, that's what I call making a measurable positive impact. Something you can point to, something you can say before it was not good, after it's much better. And I wish we would bring up our kids like that. And it's not hard to do. It's a shift.
Mhm.
It's a huge mindset. Because what we do now is learning in advance. That's what school is. The definition of education for most people is learning in advance and then proving it with a test that you've learned it. And so we sit in these classes for 12, 6, 12, 20 years, and we try to learn in advance, and we get measured and we get tested and we get all these things. And at the end, we've forgotten most of it. And people look for other reasons we've done it. Oh, it helped your thinking and it helped all these kind of things. But basically, what you're doing and what a teacher is doing is helping you learn in advance. And then in some places we say, well, let's build character too, because we would like to have character. Well, character is a very interesting thing because it's so situational. And what was called character, in your world, what you think of as character, what was called character in the 20th century may not be exactly the same thing because we're going through this evolution.
Mm. Yeah,
And
good
yeah,
point. That's so interesting. That is so interesting to think about. Like, I mean, there's some things that, of course, are basic for humanity, right? That you'd maybe pick out as character traits, like being honest or being um, trustworthy, being, things like that. But
you'd think that. And yet, look at now we weren't going to go into politics, but look at the politics. And does anybody learn by looking that honesty is important? That not being a bully is important? So who knows what's going to be? I think there are some basics, but I think that those are very much what we decide, what the group, your own group, decides are the basic things. And I would like to see the young people really be able to think about that and figure out what they think is a basic thing. So take, for example, plagiarism. That's a big one at the moment in school, right? We got AI, you can have it write your papers and stuff like that. And in the 19th and 20th centuries, probably not much before that, in the academic world, plagiarism is the biggest sin in the world. Well, now it's a world of collaboration. It's not a world of individualism anymore. It's not a world where you're trying to get your name above this person's name about that. We're trying to get things done collectively. We work on teams. We work in projects. And so that you bring in something from somebody else is not necessarily the sin it used to be in a different world. And to me, that's the biggest, most important thing is to think about how the world is different. And it's very interesting because it's very, very different in terms of intellect and technology. And now we have AI, we can look at everything that ever happened. Our computers are going to be a million times or a trillion times more powerful in the phones. And so that is happening. At the same time, our human nature, as you described, hasn't changed in 100 or 200,000 years since we became Homo sapiens. So we have what I call Lego, love, empathy, gratitude, optimism, all very important, very good. But at the same time, we all have what I call grab, greed, racism, abuse, belligerence, and bullying. And the question is which one wins? Because it's almost always the grab that overcomes the Lego. And how do we do that? And we've tried to do these kind of things. We have there have been many ways in the past, and religion was one of them. And we over with breeding over centuries, we turned wolves into dogs that are our friends and our pets. And so you can change. And what's so exciting to me is that we live in a time where this is going to be possible in very new ways. It's going to be possible genetically. It's going to be possible. We're going to become, because we have to adapt to a very new environment, we're going to figure out, hopefully, how to become better humans, better people. And it will be difficult, it'll be fraught, it'll be all sorts of things. But in the end, I think that's the huge opportunity that's with us in the third millennium, is that
mm,
not only can we think bigger and put all this missing intelligence into play and all this stuff, but we can become the people that most of us want to be. And we can become those people that we've always strived to be, and it was so hard, and it's, only a very few got there. And you read, I love the bishop in Les Miserables, and so some people got there, but very few. Most people were mixed. And then when you look around you, you see how much the grab really influences the world. If only we could diminish that. If only we could bring love and empathy and gratitude and optimism much more out in everybody. Wouldn't it be a great world?
Oh my gosh, it would be an incredible world. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, how do we bring that about?
Well, we have ways to do it now by talking about it, by thinking about it. We have all our traditional ways that you bring up a person thinking that they should be have more Lego and less grab. But there's a lot of it's not easy because people don't all grow up in good circumstances. They grow up in war zones and they grow up with bad families and they grow up, with lots of examples of bad things in their world. So I actually think it's time to experiment with changing our genetics, changing our makeup, changing who we are for the better. And because we now live in this age, and this is very controversial for lots of reasons, but we live in this age where we can do this. We're gene manipulation. We're doing it with disease. So we have no problem with saying, let's get rid of smallpox, or let's get rid of polio, or let's get rid of COVID. If we can do that, we have some problems maybe, but we know how to do that. Well, we're going to learn how to change personality and how to change people. And some people may want to make them terrible. If we get a few, we've had a few of those in history. But most people want people to be better. They want them to be nicer. They want them to be more loving. They want them to be more empathetic and optimistic. And so if we get together as that is our aim, and we work on it with the right guidelines and the right ways, I think we'll get there. I'm very optimistic that in the third millennium, humans will get better and therefore accomplish a lot more in the world and universe.
Yeah, well, I can see why that would be controversial because I think anytime you talk about genes and gene manipulation, people will get upset about that, and everybody's got opinions and whatever. And I think some of the opinions come from fear of the
Yeah, most.
unknown. We
Hmm.
don't know. There's been a couple movies where people are cloned, like the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger, whatever it was called, and he goes home
Sure.
and there's already one of them in there, whatever, and you go, oh my word, is that how life is going to be? Is that ever going to happen? And I don't know. Like I believe in God and I believe in divine intervention in a lot of ways. And so, who knows with all that stuff? But I can tell you that I do find it fascinating just what is going to happen because so many movies, besides the cloning, couple movies that have come out, when they talk far into the future, man, everything's brown and there's dust and dirt everywhere, and people have just destroyed each other, and it's a horrible place to be. And
And it
I'm
doesn't have to be like
no,
that.
no,
It
it
doesn't
doesn't.
have to be like that. The trajectory of man over since they started has a lot of ups and downs, but it's basically positive. We've become more peaceful. We've become better. Not in every case, and we go back and we have some wars and we have all these things, but the trajectory is positive. And we know at some sense, and that's why religion has been so successful and other things, that we want to be. We know what a better place is. And we want to be in that better place. And we've only had certain means. And I love the example of wolves to dogs, right? That this is possible over time. And people becoming more religious and more moral and more ethical over time. And perhaps than they were in the past. We weren't there. But that's the trajectory I think that most people want. And that's the trajectory that humanity is on if we don't disturb ourselves or destroy ourselves. But people get very scared, and they get very scared of change, and they get very scared that their kids are not going to be like them. Well, of course, their kids are not going to be like them. Their kids are going to have something either in their pocket or in their brain that is a trillion times more powerful than what they have today. So how could that not make a big difference? How could that not? Uh, and so let's look at everything from scratch. That's what I like to do. I like to say, let's look at everything and say, how would we like it to be? How would we like it to be given this? And then what can we do to make it that way? And
Right,
and
right.
that's, if we do that enough and we bring our powers together as humans, because we're very adaptable people whenever we need to be. We don't do it till the last minute sometimes. It's like there's a funny phrase that I like that says, people don't change when they see the light, they change when they feel the heat.
Oh, yeah, that is a good one. I like that.
Right.
Yeah,
And
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 true.
so, but when we have to change, we do. And we're one metaphor that I use sometimes is, suppose, we're learning to live underwater. We're going to have to learn, the sea is going to level is going to come up. We're land creatures, but we may have to learn to live underwater. We once did the opposite. We evolved from the sea onto the land, and we became that. And it took millions of years, and it did, but it happened. And so again, we're moving into this incredible new environment. It's exponential change. And a lot of people don't understand exponential change. Most people don't, because we don't have much experience with it. But exponential change is what happens when you get 2 drops of virus in your nose, and in 2 days, your whole body is sick because that virus has multiplied trillions and trillions of times. And it happens that fast. And that's the kind of change we're starting to see. We have this new thing called AI. It's 2 years old. Generative AI is literally 2 years old, just had a birthday. And now think 20 years in the future. Now think, look at how far it's come so far. And now think 20, 30, 100 years, and our kids are still going to be alive in that period.
Mhm.
So they're going to live in a very different world. And my job, what I see as my mission, is to help them prepare to live in that world and to help us, adults, prepare them and not be afraid of that world.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So interesting because things do change. And this is the biggest change that has ever happened is
Yeah.
how quickly technology is growing and multiplying and whatever. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were sitting at a table playing Pong, watching a ball go back and forth. And now kids are creating their own games that are intricate, that do all kinds of things. And that's just one thing. In fact, I'll tell you, I have 4 sons and a daughter. And when my kids were little, Nintendo was new, right? Atari and Nintendo. And they wanted a Nintendo. 2 of my sons were real into gaming, just loved it, loved gaming. Gaming also got them very interested in computers. So they're taking them apart and they're putting them together and they're buying new pieces and they're doing whatever. Well, at the time, I was getting a whole lot of criticism because, oh my gosh, you're a mom that lets your kids play video games. You're letting them just play with a computer. Like, what is wrong with you? Your kids should be outside playing. And of course, we had parameters around it, right? It's not like, hey, 24/7, just play. But we had kids, boys, that would come over Friday after school and not leave our house till Sunday night. And that whole time, they were playing video games. It's a weekend, and they're playing video games. And there was so much criticism. Well, let me tell you, those boys, and I was nervous because I didn't know. I mean, you don't know when nothing has happened before, when this is brand new. And so I was a little nervous and trying to keep things in check and seeing what I needed to do. Well, those boys are doing pretty darn good. I mean, one of them works at NASA. One of them is got his
Yeah.
PhD as a cancer researcher. Now got his MD, and so they're doing okay. They're doing okay in the world, and they're drawing on some of the things that they started learning as a young child.
And this goes back to what we talked about enthusiasm, and that you let them do something, and good for you. Those were my first books. I wrote a book called Digital Game-Based Learning, and don't bother me, Mom, I'm learning. And I tried to promote that because there were so many new things at that time that were important that young people become involved in. And now there are new things coming. So anybody who is not already deeply involved in AI is going to be at a disadvantage to those people who start learning it early. And my recommendation is every family should buy the advanced, if it costs you $20 a month and you can afford it, make sure you have the most advanced AI, and make sure you're using it yourself, and make sure you're using it with your family, and don't make decisions without it. And this is, but it takes time. People are by nature conservative, and they are frightened about stuff. And the storytellers, exactly as you said, frighten the heck out of them with the dystopian stories. And and it's very easy to do, and it's very easy to paint a picture, and it's been around, and it's what sells a movie. It's been around since 2001 and way before. Um, but that's not the way it's going to happen. I don't think that's the way it's going to play out. I think that it's just an enhancement to humans, that we are very fortunate in being in a period, and there have been periods like this where humans couldn't speak and suddenly they invented speech, right? And that changed things. Or they had to run around looking for food, they invented agriculture. That changed things. Or they invented writing in print, and now we've invented technology, this digital technology and AI. And so it's going to, again, change us, evolve us. I call it non-biological evolution.
Mm.
And we are going through a serious process of non-biological evolution in a very short period. And the difference between pre-2000, which is the second millennium, when you and I and many people grew up, and the third millennium after 2000, when suddenly we have the internet and AI and this exponential growth of technology, is totally amazing. And when we try to educate our kids, and this is where it comes into play, when we try to educate our kids who live in this world already, they know this world. They know it's their world, especially in the first world countries like the US and others. They know when we try to say, no, you need to do this. You need to learn the mess, math, English, science, social studies, and go through those classes for 12 years. And you need to, take all those tests, and you need to stress yourself out in these ways. The kids look at this and they say, no, I don't need to do that. I'm not going to do it. More and more of them are saying, I'm not going to do it. And that's why we're seeing the dropouts, and that's why we're seeing the stress and the fighting going on. And until we start saying, okay, you're a person, tell me what you're excited about. You look at the world, you're in the world, figure out what's best for you. I'm not going to say no to you. I'm going to say yes if. And and we will help you thrive in this world by doing things that you are highly enthusiastic about, by bringing out your imagination that used to be trapped inside, by helping you know yourself, by giving you projects, not giving you, but you choosing projects. And there are so many examples of this. When COVID started, I talked to a friend of mine and she said, "Oh, my kid can't go to school and I don't know what to do with her at home." And I said, just let her get a project. Let her pick a project to do. And this mother, who was very wise like you, gave her a blank piece of paper and said, "What do you want to do for your project?" And she came up with this project of helping kids, giving them various things and helping other kids. And she made it to the front page of the nation's newspaper,
Mm.
right? So for doing this. So kids, I just am so optimistic about kids and so positive and so hopeful that they can do this, and all we have to do is trust them. And sometimes give them some parameters, but basically say you can. You can. And as soon as they say I can, and then we say, yeah, and by the way, you don't have to can for what we want. You can for what you want.
Right. Right.
Once we start to do that, and we just say that the only thing we want is that it be positive in some sense. That's the only thing we care about, that you're not bullying or hurting anybody or doing that. Other than that, be our guest. Make the world better in whatever way you want to. Add value in whatever way you want to. And that's when kids really, really thrive. And it's just so different than what we do up till now. But I'm hopeful that third millennium kids will do that.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. What a lot to think about. Because it's sort of, some reverse engineering, right? Like, how do you want your kids to be when they're 25 years old? And what is it that's going to get them there? I've got a good friend who is developed this incredible parenting system. You would love him because you guys think a lot alike. And but it's reverse engineering. It's where where are your kids going to be when they're 25? What is your hope for them? What's your dream for them, and what's their dream for themselves? And then how are you going to get there? How is that going to happen?
And that's what you just said is really important because so much of what goes on is adults, parents putting their dreams on the kids. So, every parent would love their kid to be just like them, only a little better, and to have the same values and to have the same things. And if they're French, they have to have the same love of food. And if they're this, they have to have the same thing. And some will, but a lot of them, more and more of them, will just go off on their own because they have so many opportunities now, because their world is just a world of incredible opportunity. One of the things I talk about is this, there's a new thing called job crafting. So it used to be in the second millennium, you had to be job hunting. You had to find out, go look in the paper or look online and see where the jobs were available and then try to figure out and then apply. Now you can craft a job. If you have self-knowledge and you say, I can add value here incredibly more than almost anybody that I know. And then you go out and say, who needs that? Then you can do that. Same, and that's really the story that you told about the video games leading to the computers. Through the video games and the passion for all that kind of stuff, they built experience in the computers and the ability to add value through technology, and that led them to very interesting jobs that they, in a sense, crafted.
Right, right. And jobs, by the way, that are helping the world,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So,
right.
which I love that too, and everything that you talked about with that, because it should be a basic goal that we want to leave the world a better place. Like,
Absolutely.
and everybody can, in whatever way that means. It doesn't have to be, that you're in Washington, D.C. and you're picketing down the aisles and you're changing a bill or writing something. I mean, it doesn't have to be some big gesture. It can be by the way you live your life and the things that you choose to do and who are you helping.
Look at how
And
much Gandhi changed the world.
yeah, right.
And that's exactly right. And the book that before the two books that you see on the screen, the book that I wrote was called Education to Better Their World. And and I had a big fight with the guy who said, it's not the world because we all have different ideas. It's your world. You decide what will make your world better. If it doesn't hurt anybody, you go do it and and don't listen to what other people think you should do to do this necessarily. Take it into account, take everything into account, but do it your way. That's the My Way song, and people are happiest when they went their own way and had positive results.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Man, you've talked about so much today. And it is all so interesting. One thing that I think I'd like you to talk about a little bit more,
Yeah.
because it's such a thing, is why do people fear AI and why should people not fear AI?
We were brought up to think that the human mind was the pinnacle. This was the pinnacle of the universe. I mean, it might be that there's a God or something above that that some people believe, but so your own personal thoughts, and this is not necessarily the world, this is the academic tradition. This is the academic tradition, and that captured all our schools. It used to be we had a tradition where you apprenticed and you did what your parents did or you became something else. But then we developed this academic tradition. And so we had a lot of things that said, do your own work and think about yourself and don't get help from the outside and don't copy and don't do all this stuff. And that was ingrained deeply into all of us because we all went to school and all school was based on that. And the worst sin in academia is copying The worst sin in academia is cheating and copying and plagiarism. And now we're in a situation where it's like free. It's like water. It comes out, all these things. And it not only does it come out, but it's good. It's not like it, if you've ever used AI, that it makes garbage. No, it makes really good stuff. And the more you give it prompts and the more you dialogue with it, the better the stuff gets because it's trained on all of us. And so because it's trained on all of us, it behaves like us. And we're getting better at it. We're in the second year and we're going to be a whole lot better at that. What people have heard is that it's going to be different from us. There's going to be humans and AI. And as soon as you take that perspective, you can say, well, AI is going to go get better faster than humans because it is. And oh my God, there's going to be battle. And I don't see it that way. I see it as AI is a part of us. It was the missing intelligence that we invented. Very good. That's where it came from. It's now something that's integrated or becoming integrated with human minds and human thinking. And a lot of people are for critical thinking. Well, you can't really be a critical thinker now without using some AI because you need all those points of view and you need all these things. So that's what's changing. The whole concept of what a human being is changing, especially in the intellectual side. And that's in conflict, as I discussed before, with the emotional side. So we're seeing this big AI gap, this big IE, intellectual emotional gap. And that's scaring people because suppose you're a teacher and you look out into your class of 30 kids or 40 kids, whatever it is. You think often, oh, I know who those kids are. They're the same people that I was when I was that age. And emotionally, that may be fairly true. Intellectually, it isn't true at all. Intellectually, they can contact the world. They're connected to everybody. They have supercomputers in their pockets. And so that's a very scary time when, when you think that your kid, I remember a parent telling who had come from another country to the US and the kid never learned the father's language. And he said to me, it's really scary when your kid doesn't speak your language. You can't share that language thing with your kid in your native language. And yeah, that is scary because most of the adaptation is on our side. It's not on the kid's side. They are going to do it more naturally. They're going to grow up with this stuff. They're going to see how it works. They're going to experiment with it. But the adaptation that to the new environment has to come from us. And that is what is, and that's what I try to help people understand and do because we just can't keep the same ideas, the same conceits that we had in the past of what was right and what was true and what kids needed to do and how you had to be prepared for the future and that you needed this degree and you needed this kind of thing. It's not going to be the same in the world that we're going into.
Mm.
Radically different.
Yeah.
And that scares people. Why
It
it
does.
doesn't?
Well, fear of the unknown, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just a thing. But I like it that you don't have to fear it. Embrace it, get to know it, get excited about the future, get excited about our kids' future, our grandkids' future, and realize that the world's not against you, the world's for you.
The world's for you. And an example that I give that I don't know if this is helpful to it was for me to some people is suppose you are from the US and you grew up here and everything, and for some reason you had to move to China. And all you didn't know Chinese, you didn't know how to speak, you didn't know how to read, you didn't know any of these things, but you had to live your life, but you had your phone. Well, guess what? You could speak, it would translate for you. You could read, it would make you be able to do this. You could write, you just say, write this in Chinese, it would do this. All the things that you couldn't do in the past to adapt, you've got this wonderful technology to help you do. And that's for me, that's the right way to look at it, to look at this technology as a real bridge. It's a real helper for us to move into the times that we're all going to be living in because there's no turning back the technology clock. we're not gonna do that. We're gonna live in that world, and as the more we can be the bridge, and the more we can get across that bridge, and use our young people to help us, as opposed to us trying to bring them back.
Right.
That's the scary part, is that so many adults would love to bring their kids back into the world they knew, where they were comfortable, where people sat around the dinner table and had lovely discussions and didn't have their heads buried in the phones and all these kind of things. It's a great pipe dream. It's a great pipe dream, but that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that the world in 20 years and 50 years is going to be very, very different, and human behavior will be very different. We'll still be here. We'll still hopefully love each other and have empathy and gratitude and optimism. I'm certainly for that. Uh, but the way we interact with each other will just not be the way it was, any more than the way people in the 20th century interacted with each other the same way cavemen did. You know,
Right.
we
Right.
change, we evolve.
Yeah. Very interesting. This has been so interesting. I thank you so much for it's such a great conversation. I appreciate it. Where can people find you and
I'm
buy
at
your books?
the book is at thirdmillenniumkids.com, and I'm at markprensky.com. And
Perfect.
I welcome everybody's opinions on this stuff. It's somebody once said, Mark, you're a radical, but you're a useful radical. And so that's what I try to be. And I try to help people, especially young people, but all people. So I would love to hear from anybody.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you again. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you got a lot out of it and raised some questions in your mind and made you think about how you react and how you interact with people and the people around you. And so thank you for being here. And until the next time we meet, be blessed.